Minister, thank you for making time to be here with us today. My first question is as follows. Yesterday, there was an announcement made with regards to Google and the government making a deal. Before I get into that, maybe I'll just preface with this.
Madame la Présidente, je suis pas d'accord.
Madam Chair, I disagree with the fashion in which yesterday's announcement has been interpreted by my colleague. I would like to remind us that Google and Facebook opposed the government's legislating in this area.
And that's for the Liberals. Lisa Hepner. Lisa, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister and officials, for being here today. Minister, I want to start by really congratulating you on the deal that you announced yesterday. I think it's really good news. And news is so important. It's so important to Canada. It's so important to Canadians. But please explain to this committee why it was so important not to back down and to continue with the fight and to continue talking with Google.
Thank you so much for your question. And we've been talking for more than a decade about the fact that the digital platforms disrupted the advertising market, and that most of the revenues now flow to Google and Facebook. And this has a tremendous impact on democracy and on our capacity.
And we begin with Rachel Thomas again for the Conservatives. 5 minutes, please, Mrs. Thomas.
Thank you. Minister, I noticed that you answer my questions in French, but other English questions you answer in English if they're from your Liberal colleagues. I realize it's completely your choice. We're a bilingual country, but if at all possible, I'd love to have it.
Point of order. Yeah.
Point of order, point of order. That's ridiculous.
There are at least 5 people shouting for a point of order. And Clerk, did you see who was the first one? Okay, I think it was Martin. Go ahead, Martin.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, I don't need to remind you, or remind my colleague, that our guests, just like the members of this committee, can speak in the official language of their choice. We have highly efficient interpreters with us here. I use them constantly, so I can tell you that's the case. And the Minister has the full right to answer in whichever language she chooses. This is an insult to Quebecers and to Francophones.
Sorry, I think Lisa was before you. Peter?
J'avais le même appel de règlement.
Same point of order, Madam Chair. I think this is insulting. I think that we cannot request that the minister speak in one language rather than the other.
Madame la Présidente, je viens sur le même.
Yes, on the same point of order, Madam Chair. I just put 2 questions in English, and the minister, of course, has the right to respond in whichever official languages she chooses to. To have someone question the bilingualism of our country is offensive to all of us. And I certainly hope that this MP will start respecting official languages and respecting this committee.
Point of order. Yes, Mrs. Thomas. Continue.
No, I'm on the same point of order.
You're on the same point of order. Okay, we paused.
Thank you. My observation was that the Liberal member was afforded the opportunity to be answered in English, and I was not afforded that same opportunity. I recognize that we're a bilingual country, and by all means, you can answer in either language. I'm just curious if you would be willing to answer in English.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Point of order, point of order.
Order.
I have to go back to the original point in the point of order, and that is that the person speaking should choose what language they wish to speak in. And if the minister chooses French, fine. If she chooses English, fine. We cannot make her answer in whatever. Okay, good. Minister, continue. You want to ask a question? Yes, Michelle. Michael.
I think that the fact that the Conservative Party has demanded that a member speak only in English, to me is it goes against everything this country has been built on. When we come into this chamber, we have 2 official languages that everyone's afforded, and the fact that the Conservative Party is demanding that a member only use one language, to me, is just unacceptable. And it needs to be noted that, that should never happen at committee. It should never happen, in the House of Commons, and it's just something that goes against our very values as Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Cotto. I think I highlighted that when I responded earlier on, that it is a valid point of order, and the minister can answer in whatever language she chooses. Mr. Mohammed, is this something new, or are we going over the same
It is
thing?
something new on related matter. It is one thing, as Mr. Cotto has pointed out, which I think is reprehensible, for anyone to demand or suggest that one language be used. You're already clipping your demand? That's great. Can I, if I might finish what I was going to say?
Debate. Please continue, Mr. Mohammed.
What I find particularly reprehensible is the question as to why somebody has chosen to use a particular language. It's one thing to make the demand. It's another thing to ask the question why a minister chose to use a particular language. I mean, I think this speaks to something very dangerous and very irresponsible on the part of the Conservatives. And I think it would be valuable and important for Ms. Thomas to retract that question or to retract that assertion, because I think it is in the interest of all of us in this room that we not have to play silly games around the use of our official languages.
All right, to get back to the Peter.
Madam Chair, just for Mrs. Thomas's education, having been brought up in an English environment and having learned French in school, there are numerous times when you have a vocabulary in one particular language that allows you to speak more easily in that language. And that is the principle of official bilingualism. For the Conservatives to put in question official bilingualism is absolutely reprehensible, and I just can't believe how radical and extreme this party has become since the member from Carleton took over.
Thank you. I am going to now suggest that I do not want to entertain any further points of order on this issue. I have ruled as a chair that the member, Mrs. Thomas, has a question, the floor. She could question the minister, and the minister can answer in whatever language she chooses. So let's not carry on with this for too much longer. Thank you. Mrs. Thomas, your questions, please.
Minister, when I asked you about the amount of money that CBC would get, you said that they have 1/3 of all the journalists in the country. We know that the draft regulations suggest that the money from the $100 million fund that Google is generating will be divvied up according to the number of journalists that are in each news businesses. So I'm assuming then that the CBC will get 1/3 of the $100 million, which is $33 million. Do you believe that that's just when we consider local newspapers, ethnic newspapers, BIPOC newspapers, Indigenous newspapers, that will only get a small pittance? When in fact your government actually claimed that this bill was about supporting local news, small outlets. That is not the case. That is not the case. 1/3 of the amount will go to CBC. According to the PBO officer, 75% total will go to the big players such as the CBC, such as Rogers, such as Bell, such as Torstar. How will this bill support local, ethnic, BIPOC news outlets?
Merci, Madame la Présidente, puis je vais...
Thank you, Chair. And I will respond in my maternal language because I have full respect for all these questions being put, and I want to be sure that I use the right vocabulary and provide a clear answer. As I've said, the final regulations will be published before